Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dave Gordon, Executive Director of the National Sports Media Association. Welcome to another in our continuing education series seminars. Today, maximizing your social media. Would like to thank Greater Winston-Salem, Inc., which is sponsoring the continuing ed series, so thank you to them. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Gail Sideman and Ryan McGee. Michael Russo had an all-hands-on-deck meeting with the Athletic, so he's going to jump in about 45 minutes. Hopefully it's not too bad news that they're getting at the Athletic because they've received enough the last week. Anyway, let me first introduce Gail Sideman. Gail runs G Publicity. She's been involved in publicity and public relations for a long time. Also a stage manager for, what would we say, hundreds or thousands of live sporting events, Gail?
Yeah, I've been in PR for 1,000 years, and I've done 1,000 sporting events. So, and let me know if my lighting is funky because the sun keeps going in and out.
Well, because you have windows behind you, you are backlighted.
Okay.
So you can either maybe turn around, if that's possible, or
beep, beep,
at least, there you go, much better.
There it goes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Ryan McGee, senior writer at ESPN, who had an awesome article that was posted last night. I didn't see it till this morning, but Ryan, great job on that. Ryan's been involved in all facets of ESPN and SEC Network, does Marty and McGee show on SEC Network, is Paul Feinbaum's best fill-in, and son of a legendary college football back judge and former president of Wingate University, Jerry McGee. So both of you, welcome. And I guess I'll throw it out for you guys to start by just tell us a little bit about your background with social media, how you started with it, and what you think its main purposes are. And whichever of you can start.
Ryan, go ahead.
Okay. You guys hear me okay? I switched microphones. Is that good?
Perfect.
Okay, excellent. So I joined Twitter. I mean, I think we were all on Facebook early on, and that was just a personal page. But for professionally, I joined Twitter sitting in the press box at Rosenblatt Stadium in Omaha, Nebraska. I guess it would have been 2009 because I joined because I had a book coming out, and I thought I should probably do something to promote the book. And that was honestly the only reason I joined. We didn't understand at the time what Twitter was going to be. And then eventually I did Instagram. I have a Snapchat account I never look at. I let my wife and daughter do the TikToking. But Twitter is really, and I think this is pretty true in the sports world. Twitter is really the primary outlet for better or for worse. As the years have gone on, I think I'm doing a lot more just posting stories and getting out of the way, like I did with this NASCAR Confederate flag column on Wednesday night, but I still like to interact when I can. And I do have a Facebook page, a Ryan McGee Sports Writer Facebook page that I post to a lot. Doesn't get a ton of traffic, but I like to put it on there so that my relatives can read my stuff.
Gail?
I use mostly Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm not a big Facebook fan. For probably the last few years, my account still exists, but I really don't post on it. In fact, I have something that says, if you want to follow me on Twitter. But I used it just simply because I was looking for other avenues to create exposure for clients and myself. And it really grew from there. And my clients kill me every time I say that they should probably be using it if they're not. But on the other hand, it really broadens your world. Even those of us, like Ryan said, he's getting flack from a few people, and some of us say things that people pick up on, but I found it to be a really good publicity tool. And I share my thoughts, I share my posts, and I've met some pretty cool people from it that I've gone on to meet in real life. And I also use, I use Instagram a little bit. I don't love pictures of me, so the stuff on Instagram it's, you know, like dogs balancing on a basketball or goofing things like that. So that's really most of my Instagram page. And then LinkedIn is more for connecting with people who I might not otherwise know, or people that I knew way back when. It's like, hey, I'm so glad to see you're here. So it's, you know, never underestimate those either.
So if you were to have, let's say, Ryan, your story last night, I like to say Twitter is sports Twitter, or sports Twitter is Twitter, selfishly, arrogantly. If you have a story like that, is that the first place you go to share it?
It is. Yeah, it is. And it's just simply because of the reach. You know, my Instagram is funny. I mentioned like my personal Facebook page. I mean, that's vacation pictures and whatever else. I don't put a lot of work there. Instagram is somewhere in between, whereas Twitter is almost strictly work. It's almost like you're different people. You know, I've never, in my daughter's 15 years, which I've been on Twitter almost that entire time, I've never posted her face. I've never posted her name. When she was a little girl, I would post the back of her head doing something cool. On Facebook, I would, because I've got control over that. But that's just always kind of been a little bit of a tick of mine. But yeah, so with Twitter, it's 100% sports oriented. It's 100% the job oriented. I might post something funny about an observation in the world, but I'm much more likely to put that on an Instagram post than I am on Twitter. Twitter is almost strictly motorsports. So like, or not motorsports, but just sports in general. So I post a lot of links to stories. Whatever the pinned tweet is almost exclusively a link to a story that I've written most recently. Dave mentioned my father was a college football official. We have a book coming out in September, Sidelines and Bloodlines, available now to purchase pre-order. But I will no doubt beat my followers over the head with a lot of promotion of that. A lot of pictures of my dad back in the day, pictures of my brother and myself back in the day. So it's really just about trying to get my work in front of as many people as I possibly can.
Gail, you have clients. How do you coach them on where they should be and how often they should be?
It really depends on what their goal is, who they want to get in front of. I have one author client right now that doesn't want to be on Twitter. And I've told him, especially sports Twitter, how involved it is and whatever, but he built a small Facebook following before he hired me, and that's what he feels comfortable with. And we are going to shoot some YouTube videos, some quick blips, and try to get some of those. And he does have, I set up a Twitter page for him. I just kind of convinced him to try it a little while, and then once I'm out of the picture, if he wants to dump it, he can. But I personally find it's a good way to get the word out. And let's face it, there are a lot of journalists there, and that's where I'm looking to get in front of. I realize that PR has changed a lot, that we're not just looking to pitch stories, but to get in front of the audience. But I think that you all can help me get my stories out there, so I know that I can find you on Twitter.
Makes sense. Ryan, if you were to, actually, I'll take a little informal show of hands poll here. How many people first choice for social media is Twitter when you post? Number 2, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. So it's kind of all over the board, which I find interesting. Gail, let's talk about engagement with fans. How important is it for us as media people to not just post something, but to stay engaged with our readers or viewers or listeners?
I think it's very important, because obviously before social media, you didn't have an outlet where you can talk directly to your fans. They may have written letters to the editor or written you hard copy letters, sent them to the paper or the station, and maybe you wrote back and maybe you didn't. But this is a quick way. Hopefully they ask respectfully about your story, or saying they really liked your story, or maybe they disagreed with it, but they say so in a very
civil.
Yeah, that. But I think it's important for your audience to get to know you as a person. We're in a very personality-oriented society right now because of social, and because everything is out there. We have a zillion different channels and social opportunities. So I think it's important for them to get to know you as a person, because people like to do business with whom they like and trust. So they'll go buy your book because they like what kind of writing you're doing, or they'll watch your show because they like engaging with you. So those kind of things can translate to readers, viewers, etc.
Ryan, it's important to be genuine one way or another with your audience too, correct?
Oh, there's no question about it. And I think they can sense that. You know, we see it with athletes. If an athlete is not running their own social media, or a movie star or whatever, if they're not running their own social media, you can tell pretty quick when you're just trying to sell me something, or when you're just trying to promote something. But if you're Tom Hanks and you interact, not every day and with a ton of stuff, but every now and then pop in there and interact with someone. Mark Hamill, Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker tweeted at me about something, and I still have not recovered. And so, but if there's just it humanizes them just enough, right? But you can do it too much. I talk all the time about I'm very thankful for it, but as I have gained more followers over the years, it becomes less and less fun. And so your goal is to still stay as interactive and as personal as you were when you had, 1,700 followers. But there's kind of a 1,000 follower rule. Each additional 1,000 followers is a little less fun. Like I enjoy Twitter a lot more than my colleague Marty Smith does. Marty Smith has twice as many followers as I do. And so I think sometimes you want to be more personal and you want to interact more, but you have to pick your spots. And if you watch the really great ones, again, like Tom Hanks, Mark Hamill, if you watch the really great ones, that's what they do. They pick their spots. They don't really do a lot of fighting. And they tweet and they move on. And that's something that I've had to learn certainly over the last few weeks, but certainly in the last 24 hours when I posted what's probably the most divisive column I've ever written.
I saw last check I saw before I got on here and started setting up 1,000 tweeted comments. The vast majority of them are positive. Wait, are those the ones that stick with you, or do the negative ones stick with you?
No, I think early on the negative ones stick with you. But what you learn too is that I say this all the time. The beautiful thing about the internet is everyone has a voice, and then the terrible thing about the internet is everyone has a voice. I go back to one of my favorite sports books of all time was the I Had a Hammer book that Hank Aaron wrote when he finally wrote his autobiography, and this was in the 1990s, and it was the first time that Hank Aaron published some of the hate mail that he received and the letters that he'd received. And I was having this conversation with someone last night. Can you imagine what it would have been like if Hank Aaron had to spend the winter of 1973-74 waiting to hit a couple home runs with social media? And so it's you just have to learn to understand that if you hand everyone a microphone, the idiots are probably going to be the loudest. But you're right. Knock on wood, the vast majority of the response is usually positive. And that's what you would hope. If you have thousands of people following, you would hope they're following you because they like what you do.
That's what I find interesting, Ryan, because, you see some people who will talk to a writer or broadcaster and say, well, you've said something I don't like, so I'm unfollowing. Well, you don't have to announce it. It's fine. I respect it.
Yeah,
you can
bye.
follow,
Exactly.
follow, unfollow. You can change the channel on your radio, on your TV. It's not a big deal.
No, it's not. But they want you. They want the response. I'm a big fan of mute. I don't block anyone, but my mute list is deep and it has become a lot deeper in the last 24 hours with this Confederate flag thing. And so I love mute because I like to envision them screaming into an empty closet and they can't figure out why I won't respond. That's
right.
If I block them, I think they kind of want that people will put in their profile, I was blocked by so-and-so. And I don't want to let somebody do that. I'd like for them to just keep screaming and thinking that one day I'm going to respond, but I don't have any idea they're there.
No, I mean, that's
what's the point?
Exactly. There really is none. And
I think it's impossible on some level to not let that influence what you're doing, even if it's just a tick. And at the end of the day, if you want to keep pure to your style of writing, your style of broadcast, your style of whatever, then you can't let yourself be influenced by someone who's in there with ulterior motives. You just can't. You got to keep it true to yourself. And so that's why, again, I would love to sit and just spend all night on my phone going back and forth with people like I used to, but at the end of the day, it's not that becomes very difficult. Yep.
Gail, as a woman, I think you can probably relate to a lot of the women in this business who are on Twitter and have to put up with whatever. You can go to whatever power or exponent of the nastiness that a Ryan McGee would get, just because of the gender, right?
Yeah, but I'll admit I've been fortunate compared to some of my friends in journalism. A lot of those are behind the camera and they get some pretty vile comments. Most of it I've gotten into weird things like people debate on really dumb and senseless things. And sometimes I'll try and debate it and other times I'll just let it go. One thing that I do besides mute is I'll type out something and I'll want to hit send and then I delete it because I know that we're better off not sending it and engaging the idiots. Like Ryan said, you have to pick and choose your spots. Sometimes I really want to get into a conversation and I want to know what someone else is thinking. But other times, that they're just trying to pick a fight. And I've told that to my media friends who are like, where do these people come from? And I said, you know what? They're just trying to get your goat. This is the one that you just have to let go.
Kelly Burke, do you want to chime in on that?
Yes, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Dave, I have some friends that have had horrendous things happen to them on social media. And I'm talking about other female colleagues and friends. I mean, people that have gotten death threats or got, people saying, I hope you get raped, like just absolutely abhorrent stuff. I've certainly gotten comments over the years, but nothing near like at that level. But it's what Gail and Ryan have alluded to, that you meet those people and you just don't put a lot of stock. And, I've never been one to care what people think of me. I don't put my self-worth in what other people think of me. Of course, I value what my family and my friends think of me, but strangers, I could really care less. I know how I live my life. I know what I stand for and the values. And so I'm just not going to care what trolls hiding behind a computer screen write on there. I covered a coach at Southern Illinois University. He's not the coach there anymore, but some of you may know the name Barry Hinson. And Coach Hinson always talked about that, the trolls on Twitter and social media are the, 47-year-old guys that are still living in their mom's basement in boxer shorts, eating Cheetos like during the day and not working. So I think you just have to remember a lot of times who these trolls are writing these comments. And yes, it's easy to get worked up by them, but you just have to remember the source of it and not let it affect you.
So
And
Kelly, are you saying that you're not going back to the kitchen? That's the
actually the funny thing.
craziest thing to me. I sat
God.
with Laura Rutledge is one of the greatest human beings I know, and she and I sat a couple years ago. We sat on the SEC Network bus, and she goes, "Can I just show you something?" And I said, "Yeah." And she just started scrolling through Twitter, and all she had said was, "Hey, it's game day in Tuscaloosa," or whatever. Just "Hey, good morning," and watch the show at 10 o'clock. And she goes, "This happens every time," and it was 50 guys saying, "Go back to the kitchen." And I didn't think that anyone would say that. And now it's just, but anyhow, I just, for the record, everybody, Kelly Brook is not going back to the kitchen.
Yeah. I mean, Laura, obviously, I mean, that's who I'm talking about. People like her that are excellent at their jobs and are way more high profile than somebody like me that get just crazy comments. And the kitchen comment I find funny because I'm like, well, somebody can say that, but like, you know what? I actually am pretty good in the kitchen, and I'm also pretty good at my job too. So you can say that, but guess what? I can do both things. So it's a win-win situation. But yeah, I mean, it's just, some of the stuff is just ridiculous. I actually, I got it more, honestly. I worked in local TV sports. I now work as a color analyst and play-by-play. And before I switched to doing games full-time, I was a local TV sports anchor at an ABC station in Southern Illinois and also in some other states too. But I used to get more crazy emails from viewers. I mean, and not even stuff that's relevant, stuff like, "I hated what you wore today," or "your hair looks like shit."
I got that from other anchors too.
Yeah, crazy stuff. I had a woman one time, and she'd written like several times, and she never would like really come out and say who she was. But I got an email one time from her saying she wanted to headbutt her TV every time I came on the air, because the sound of my voice was like nails on a chalk. I mean, just crazy stuff. And that one I printed off and saved that one because that one was so crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
You don't
The
like
clothes,
it.
the clothes I didn't see coming. Like that's anytime I'm on anywhere, I can't believe you wore that tie. Are you really wearing those shoes with those pants? And it's almost exclusively for men. And I'm like, okay, guys, I'm sorry I wore the wrong kicks today, but that's okay.
or if you wear the colors of one of the teams that might be playing that day.
Really in trouble.
I actually am super conscious when I do games about purposely not wearing the colors. The only times I've had issues is if I'm on a long road trip and I run out of clothes, and then you don't think about it, and you end up, I mean, it's a disaster then when that happens.
All right, back to social media. Thank you, Kelly.
Sure, sorry to go on a rogue tangent.
No, but it's true.
Well, I know we're all good at that. Well, let's talk about advice for maybe some of the younger people on here, Gail. I don't know how much I should tweet every day, and should I tweet about me? Should I tweet about, say I'm doing play-by-play for college women's basketball? You're welcome, Matt. How often should I tweet?
You know what? I think it really depends on what you're comfortable with. I do believe that your percentages in what you share and how much you engage, you should engage probably 90% more than the things that you're pitching. I like to share information, but sometimes I'll ask a question along with it just to get people to engage, because you don't want to just appear that you're trying to sell something or get somebody to watch something or read a post. It depends on your audience, who you want to have as your audience. And again, it goes back to where are they? Beyond the social outlet where your audience hangs out, and then kind of read the room. I mean, I have to read the room every day, especially during the last couple of months, because while I was pitching a timely story, there's a virus going around the world. So I wanted to be sensitive of what people are going through before I either pitched or posted to social media. So it really depends on who your target audience is and what makes you feel comfortable.
All right, I need everyone to look at your camera and smile for a minute. I'm going to screenshot it instead of holding up my phone and taking a picture, because I honestly didn't even think about that. On three, 1, 2, 3. There, thank you. LinkedIn, Gail, you brought that up. What is the place there for what we do?
I think it's a good way to post articles that you either links to your blog, or if you post something original on there, because even though it's gotten a little bit more loose in the last 5-6 years, it's still known as a social media outlet for business connections. And I've been told I don't use it enough. And I probably could stand to find out what people are doing and where they've moved and what they're engaged in, because you can search it very well. I mean, with the hashtags and so forth, it's a good way to connect with other business people in your area, or maybe you're looking to go into another job, and it's another way to find somebody who's in the industry that you're thinking about jumping to.
It's good. Your profile on LinkedIn is really your resume. So, I mean, that's important to keep updated. Yes.
Yeah, I guess so.
Ryan, do you use LinkedIn at all?
I use it for research. Like, honestly, my profile is kind of a ghost profile. I use it for research. Like, if I'm trying to track someone down for a story that I'm working on, it's not my first option, but a lot of times, I mean, I just recently found a Hollywood screenwriter that I was having a really hard time getting his publicist to call me back. And I found him on LinkedIn, and there was his home telephone number. So that's what I use it for primarily, is trying to find people that I need to talk to for stories. But I knock on wood, I haven't updated my resume a lot because I don't want to leave where I am, but I probably need to do that.
Just leave your latest story up there. You don't need a resume.
That's right. Thank you.
It is kind of, so when you go on there, if you haven't been even in a week or two, and you see some of the, you think that you're caught up with everything that's going on in the world, sports or otherwise, and then you go on a LinkedIn and someone shares a post that you hadn't seen yet. And I find some real gems in there.
Using video and or pictures, how important?
Very. It's almost to the point where, and I work with a lot of my clients as far as either helping direct them in how to post. I've also posted for clients, which I don't particularly like doing, because unless I really, really know their voice, and I had a client like that for 3 years where I told him that I knew his voice better than he knew his own. But photos were so important, because that's often what's going to lead people to click the link in your story. But be careful how you use them, because a lot of them are copyrighted.
Is Getty Images coming after you if you use a copy? I'm not condoning the use of copyrighted material, but I mean, is there just too much out there for them to even come after you?
I've wondered that, but I wrote a post about a couple days ago about whether the timing of the protests, while people weren't playing games right now, were whether this was a good time for athletes to be involved. Would they be more or less involved if they were in season? And I almost went and put a picture of Colin Kaepernick in the post, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's, someone's going to come after me for that. So, instead I, included photos of people that I knew. So I know that they'll, if they want to come after me, that's fine.
Ryan, how much, I mean, I know the answer to this because I follow you, but every post has photo or video for you?
Pretty close. Yeah, I was just sitting there thinking about it while I was listening. I don't think that was the case in the beginning. I go back to when Facebook first started, and you didn't just put a status update. It was Ryan is. That's the way the sentence started.
Mhm.
And I loved that as a writer and as the challenge of trying to come up with something for that. It didn't last very long. And I think about where that started. And then I think when Twitter came along, it was always just, I'm just trying to write quips. I'm just trying to write, something funny or something smart or whatever. But anymore now, yeah, I think it has a picture attached to it. At the very least, it has a link attached to it, video, or, and I'm a big GIF guy, probably to a fault. I don't even know if I'm saying GIF right. Is it? Yes, GIF, right?
Well, let's take the poll right now. How many GIF hard G? How many GIF? Thank you, James. You and me, babe.
All right. That
When
GIF is
all I
peanut.
know is when it first.
I got GIF in the cabinet over here that I'm gonna put on a sandwich later. Right. But I'm a visual guy anyway, and so people seem to react to that more. But it's not about getting a reaction. To me, it's just if it makes me laugh, then I'm going to attach a picture. But I'm trying to be very conscious because I have so many friends in the photography industry. I try to be very conscious of making sure that if it's not something that ESPN has sent me or ESPN is attached to a story, I try to make sure to at least give credit, particularly if I right click a lot, if a race team, when Richard Petty Motorsports posted a picture of this is what Bubba Wallace's car is going to be on Wednesday night at Martinsville, I right clicked that picture. And when I posted it, I made sure to tag them in it because I want to make sure that the credits were credits due. But have I stolen some goofy pictures off of Google Images? 100%. And I feel a little guilty about it, but only a little.
Just a little bit.
One thing that I'll say too is that when you're marketing yourself, video is important, even if you're not in the broadcast area. And like I tell people, do as I say, not as I do, because there isn't a whole lot of video of me out there. But with the client that I was telling you about who doesn't love Twitter, I asked him if we can shoot a couple of quick 30-second, 1-minute tidbits about his books, and he was all into that. So those are, again, people can see you, and when they see you, maybe you look like them, you look like a sister, you have a trustworthy face or a friendly smile, and they'll want to engage with you. So that's my goal with anybody that I work with, because obviously I don't get into this business for getting people to hate you.
Do either of you schedule your tweets?
I don't.
Ryan? Anybody else on your scheduled tweets?
I'll tell you why. Because I can't remember exactly what it was. We've had so many things go on in our world, but people will schedule posts and something, God forbid, happens in the world, in the country, and your scheduled tweet goes out and you appear very tone deaf and that you're not aware of what's going on, the sensitivity going on around you. So I personally don't schedule them. I don't believe in it, but other people that do, I guess they must find value in it.
I find when I deal with athletes, so when I wrote a book with Dale Earnhardt Jr. a couple of years ago, and he's so cerebral and he's very careful and rightfully so about what he says and when he says it. And I remember I would be tweeting stuff about, hey, Dale Jr. and I just wrote a great chapter for the book or whatever. And he would like, don't post that now. Post it between the hours of whatever tomorrow night, because he had looked at the research, which is, this is peak hours for this group and this is peak hours for that group. And so I went down that road for about a week, and it's just, I'm not smart enough to figure those things out. But the scheduled tweet that's a real thing. I remember Danica Patrick one time, she loves to, on her social media, she loves to post cooking stuff. She's big on cooking and eating healthy. She's written a book about it. And we had this huge news story in IndyCar. And I can't remember what the story was now, but this huge story went out. And Danica, who, made her name as an IndyCar driver and was racing back in IndyCar at the time, like 10 minutes after this big announcement from IndyCar, it goes out, man, I love cooking with so-and-so oil whenever I'm doing so-and-so.
Huh.
And you could tell it was like, it was a timed tweet. And then immediately she tweeted out, oh, and by the way, big news at IndyCar. So it's just, you're exactly right. You paint yourselves into a corner. And I don't falter for that, but it just was, that's always the example that pops in my head.
Well, we could tell somebody that she's just gone back to the kitchen.
Touche. Yeah, I use it. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Gail,
Pardon me?
I'm sorry. I talked over.
Well, I was going to say that's easy for me to say because people tell me to stay away from the kitchen.
There you go. I will plead guilty. I schedule tweets, and many of you probably could tell. I use TweetDeck, and I just mainly for promoting these. Anything I want to promote, if it's timely, and I know it's there's a fixed time, I will do every 3 or 4 hours for 2 days leading up to this Zoomcast, for instance.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
What if something happened, you're on a car trip, you're driving, something happens, earth-shattering, good, bad, or otherwise, and you've got these timed tweets, and you're not in a position to cancel it? Do you go back and apologize? Or
I don't know that anything I would put out there would be tone deafable.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm just promoting what we do.
That's true.
Which I don't see any way where that would be considered tone deaf, no matter what happened. I guess maybe if I don't really want to say it, someone were to get killed or something, someone major. But anyway.
Or Georgia Tech just beat Wake Forest a zillion times in a row.
There you go. Why don't we open up to some questions now, hoping that Mike Russo's meeting won't go too much longer. So if anyone has a question, please just unmute and go right ahead. Kelly, go ahead, or you can use your hand, raise your hand. Kelly, go ahead.
I was curious for both of you, Ryan and Gail. Ryan, you mentioned that you leave not Snapchat. What's the other one? TikTok to your wife and daughter. I keep hearing, for example, with TikTok that all the impressions you're able to get and all the numbers and stats from it are unlike any other platform out there. But I'm going to be honest. So I do a lot of my sports stuff I put on Twitter. I have Instagram. I have a professional Facebook page and a personal, and I put some sports stuff on there. But I kind of just think, for me at least, that there's only so many platforms you can do and do well. So I'm just curious, both of your opinions on, when is it too many platforms? And if you're going to go on to all these platforms, do you need to go all in on all of them?
Go ahead, Ryan.
I know it's a great question. I honestly am kind of maxed out. And I think at some point, I have 10 times the number of Twitter followers that I do Instagram, way more than that, actually. And so I think that, so as a result, if I'm really trying to push something out there, that's where I'm going to go. But yeah, I have accounts set up on all those platforms, but I'm already so tired once I post to Twitter and Instagram and the Sportswriter Facebook page, and then also do what I have to do for work with it. There's a point where I'm just like, you know what? Snapchat, y'all are just gonna have to live without this one, because I just can't. I only have so much time, and I have to get on to the next deal.
It's like I tell clients too, that do as much as you can handle and be comfortable with. For me, I need to just limit it to regularly 2 outlets, and maybe I'll jump onto another one, but you can be so consumed. And I know that even on Twitter, people get me into conversations when I'm just at the point where I need to be offline, so I can't tend to it. And then I kind of feel bad. Imagine if you were on 4 or 5 streams at one time in different outlets. That can be kind of stressful. So, again, leave it up to you whatever you can work with, but don't feel like you're married to each one of them. Does it make sense, Kelly?
It does. And as a follow-up to that question, when you are posting on multiple platforms, for example, something I post on Twitter, I also want to put on my professional Facebook page or Instagram, how much of that content needs to be totally repurposed, or can I essentially repost what I post on Twitter and repurpose it on those other platforms without having to really change, do a completely different post?
No, I'm Control C, Control C, Control C.
Okay.
Yeah, if particularly if I post something to Twitter, I will immediately copy and paste it into the Sports Writer Facebook page. That's my move one and move two. And then on Instagram, I don't post a lot of work links there. For this, if it's a story that I particularly want as many people to see as possible, like the Confederate flag story that's up right now, I'll put that link in the bio to my Instagram. But it doesn't bother me if and I find that there's kind of different audiences. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of crossover there, but I feel like the group that's following me on the Facebook Sports Writer page, which is not a big group, that's a completely different group than the Twitter crowd. So yeah, and if there's a handful of people that say he's lazy, he shouldn't have just copied and pasted, I don't care. Click on the link, dude. That's all I care about.
No, I
Part
do
of the
Twitter
the bad part of Instagram is you can't post clickable links, right?
Right. Which I don't have a problem with, and I think that's part of what I like about Instagram is, I think ESPN McGee on Instagram is probably a completely different experience than ESPN McGee on Twitter, just because it's not just work, sports. If there's some funny life moment, I'll post that on Instagram first, and but like I say, occasionally I will go the link route on Instagram just because it's something I really want everyone to see.
Robert Eggleston, you want to unmute and ask your question? Robert, by the way, is one of our NSMA board members, along with Ryan McGee.
And I'm not in your industry, but I've always been a sports fan, primarily a couple of sports, college and auto racing and college sports. But are you, for veterans and rookies out there, I'm kind of curious to throw up the question of, do you wish all this social media didn't exist, or do you love it and thrive on it? Or do you just wish, I'm still when I'm out of town, I read the Winston-Salem Journal's e-edition, but when I'm in town, I want the paper. And I don't really have, now I end up with an iPad or my phone next to me and I go check out stuff, but I'm the most social person you'll ever meet that isn't on social media. I'm on LinkedIn and that's it. Do you wish social media didn't exist in your world because it's such a tornado, or do you love it?
I love it because it added a tool to my toolbox. I was getting really frustrated from a publicity standpoint back in the day because, man, if we see our newsrooms decimated now, I mean, when the cuts first started happening 10, 12 years ago, I was beside myself. I mean, people were leaving newsrooms. The contacts that I had for years and years were going elsewhere or being let go, and editors were changing what they wanted. I mean, you never knew from even an assignment editor what they wanted from day to day. And all of a sudden, social media allowed another tool to get your message out there. And with something like Twitter, you have to do it multiple times a day. But I think it offered another option how to get your information out. And I say that to clients too.
Yeah, I have to defend myself protect myself from going down the spider hole. It's funny. I realized my routine in the fall when I'm not on an airplane, I take my daughter to school, go to the gym, go home and get a cup of coffee, and I start working. I work from the house. And I realized last fall, I was spending about an hour right off the bat going through Twitter. And I need that hour. I need that hour back. I got deadlines to hit. I've got phone calls I need to make, and I've got a plane I got to catch, or I might need to go upstairs and talk to my wife. And so I think there's times when I found myself kind of going down that rabbit hole when you just didn't need to do it. And it's my news source. I mean, I have, lists, and I go hit, all right, let me make sure I'm not missing anything in college football, or I'm not missing anything in motorsports or anything else. And, but I have to make myself get off of it. So to Robert's question, I think that it's as difficult as you're going to let it become. And there have certainly been times where I let it become more than it should have been. And in the pie chart of my daily life, I've tried to whittle that down as much as I can, because, you can't get the time back, and I can't complain to an editor that my deadline is ridiculous if I spend at least 7 hours a week, 1 hour a day, just, what'd this guy say? What'd that guy say? I'm not working then.
Yeah. I think for most people, it's a love-hate relationship with social media. I mean, I love the publicity PR side of it that I can get. And, Facebook is great for family and friends, and then LinkedIn for business. So, and then try not to pay attention to the stuff we talked about earlier, because I think that's the real time waster. But Ryan, also, we have, on our NSMA, National Sports Media.org webpage, we do top 5 daily links. So we try to, publicize some of the best stories. Our number 1 priority is sports media, and then sports great stories. I posted Ryan's story this morning. So, and that's where I get them all from. Is I'll go through my Twitter. I actually play Twitter off against Facebook and see where I can find the most good stories. But yeah, love-hate relationship.
To Robert's point, I still get things from my hard copy newspapers. I still get a couple of papers each day, and I've got a couple of digital subscriptions and of other papers. So it's, obviously I'm in the business of having to know a lot about different things, but I can still get information from different sources and kind of weed out what's credible, what's not, or what I want to take seriously, what I don't.
I would think that the sports writers or casters that really want to dive in deep are maybe frustrated, because you can't spend as much time on research or diving in deep when people expect instantaneous reactions, news, and analysis, whatever.
Pat Krause, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave. Gail and Ryan, thanks so much for doing this today. General question about posting links, specifically for Twitter, whether it's a written column, whether it's digital video or a podcast or something similar. What strategies have you found in your careers that have increased people clicking on the links, whether it's time of day? I know, Ryan, you talked about that a little bit with Dale Jr., or making the tweet itself more visually attractive. What strategies have you found, either one of you, as to how to increase clicks off of interactions?
Well, I'll say this. What I have found is it's so when I post a link that my bosses at ESPN.com sent me, as with any link, a photo pops up and there'll be kind of a self-generated headline. I delete that immediately. And I write my own lead to whatever the story is, because all due respect to my editors who write the headlines, what you find is that you have to give them a reason to click on the link. If they think they can just read the headline and not have to read the story, that's 100% what they're going to do. The numbers say there's not a ton of traffic when it goes to clicking on links. And so you have to find a creative way, or, an incendiary way, a funny way, to get people to click on it. So when I posted my piece about the Confederate flag, I always write filed to ESPN, and that lets people know this is a link to a story. This is something I've been working on. And I think what the headline from ESPN.com was, like, the Confederate flag is finally gone at NASCAR races, and that was it. And this was a column I poured blood into. And so what I wrote was, I said, the Confederate flag is finally gone at NASCAR races. I won't miss it for a second. And don't even come at me with heritage, not hate. My family history is what it is, so I know the difference. I know some angry redneck's going to click on that. And so, so the idea is, it's the old phrase, and it's the truest thing when it comes to sports writing or any writing: get them in the tent, right? It's the old circus saying, get them in the tent. And so my goal is not to sensationalize anything, but to let them know what this is about. and make them want to click on it and see what the leads. I think a well-written couple of sentences, and honestly, most of those lines are taken straight out of the piece, but a couple of well-written sentences to let people know this is what it is. It can't just be, Zion Williamson had a tough night against Carolina last night. No, Zion Williamson's shoe blew apart like an old truck tire. Here's the inside story, right? I mean, you got to get them, you got to make them follow the end of the sentence and click.
Well, with your Confederate flag story, the fact that you said that this was something personal to you, it goes back to opening yourself up, being authentic, that kind of thing. I'm not a big NASCAR fan, but the Confederate flag and that it was something personal from a white guy, frankly, made me click on it because I was curious.
And I appreciate that.
And it was very nicely done.
Jeff Kolpak, if you would unmute yourself. Good to see you, my friend.
Hey, good to see you, Dave. Thanks for doing this. My question for you two concerns breaking news. Like, say the quarterback, you find out the quarterback sprained his ankle, is going to miss the game. We've had an emphasis to crank out, a couple paragraphs and then tweet it out. So the link is on your Twitter page. It's also, you're waiting 10, 15 minutes before it gets out there, which turns into a long 10, 15 minutes. You're hoping nobody else breaks that. So do you wait 10, 15 like we do and tweet out, or do you put it out right away and say, check our website?
Are you saying that you wait so to check things in the story, or the deliberate waiting period?
So we put it on our website first, and then you link out that, you tweet out that link. I'm sorry.
Got it.
But that's also 10, 15 minutes later, and that could be a long time.
If it's a link from your website, I don't see any reason why. I mean, I guess if it's a company policy, I get it. But if it's on your website and they're going to click to your website regardless, I think you're still generating the same traffic to the place that you want them to go, correct?
Well, not necessarily, because if you just put out, hey, quarterback Joe Jones is going to miss the game, check my site later.
I see what you're saying.
No,
Yeah.
That's immediate. Yeah.
Yeah, and the question there comes, and we had this discussion a lot at ESPN when Twitter was really getting rolling, which is, for example, I know of writers who will literally, all they do is tweet, and they tell the editors, I'm about to send out 15 tweets, take those and turn it into a story, because it's way more important to them, because they're in the process of breaking news to get it out there. But yeah, I don't think there's any problem with that, because it lets everybody know, number one, you got it first, and you know it's right. But in the meantime, I've got to write something about it, because there is, as a writer, there's nothing more frustrating when you've written your post-race, column about the college football playoff championship, and you're sitting there waiting, and you have something in the story that no one else has, and you're sitting there waiting and sitting there waiting and sitting there waiting on it to post, and you're watching Athletic post it and SI post it, and they're all posting their stuff, and you're sitting there thinking, I know I had this before they did. Right. So yeah, no, I totally get it, but putting it out there and letting them know we have this story coming, film at 11, right? It's the exact same thing. So yeah, I see what you're saying.
There is one thing that several years ago when I spoke to a group at STAA about being first, and being first as opposed to being right. And I'll always side with making sure that it's right before it's first, because we've all been stuck in that situation where I know I've retweeted something from a fake account. The hint is always look for the blue check mark. But instead of being first, I feel more comfortable if I'm feeling confident in my source, in who's posting the story and who's posting the tweet and that kind of thing.
Before we take our next question, Ryan McGee has to go. He's got a little Sports Center duty. So thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
Thank y'all so much. And listen, and speaking of social media, hit me up if you see me and let me know you were on the call, and we'll start a little dialogue.
And couldn't have been better timing. Michael Russo has joined us from, you're in Minneapolis, Mike?
Yeah, outskirts of Minneapolis.
The suburbs.
Yep.
There you go.
Sorry I'm so late. We had a athletic meeting that usually goes about 40 minutes. It went an hour today for, I'm sure, well-publicized reasons.
Well, hopefully it wasn't too painful. So.
No, today was good. Last Friday was painful.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Glad to hear that. Next question, Sam Hyman. Sam, go ahead and unplug if you like. Unmute.
Hi, Dave. Sorry, I'm having video technical difficulties, but this question is for the both of you. What are some creative and good ways to gain people's attention on social media while you're at the beginning stages of your career?
Good
Go ahead,
question.
Michael.
Yeah, well, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Michael Russo, work for The Athletic. I was in the newspaper industry for since I was 15 years old, from the early 90s until 2017 when I left the Star Tribune. I worked for the Sun Sentinel for the first 15 years. Was at the Star Tribune for 12 years, and then The Athletic the last 3. And been a hockey writer pretty much my whole career, except for the first 6 years when I did pretty much everything down in South Florida, mostly a lot of high schools, and worked my way up to covering the Florida Panthers. Now I cover Minnesota here, and I'm a national hockey writer at The Athletic. In terms of, it's hard. I mean, I always say social media, and again, I know I've missed a lot of this, so I don't know what you guys have covered. But for me, social media partially, obviously, is to give news, to me, publicize the stories that you write, but it's also to create a brand. It's to also give personality, and I think that's probably why I've been able to gain such an audience both nationally and here in Minnesota. Is I don't hide who I am, but I also break a lot of news. And I'm lucky enough to cover a league where you're able to break news, because the one thing about the NHL still is that it's very print, even though I work for an online capacity now, it's print driven. I mean, you don't have to react to what Fox or ESPN is reporting in the NHL. You have the ability as a beat writer, if you develop great sources, to build that brand and become the one-stop shop for the team that you're covering. So that's basically it. I mean, I got really lucky here in Minnesota. I do a lot of TV and radio and things like that. But when I started and got here, that was sort of the advent to social media. And I just kind of jumped in with 2 feet and was able to create a following. And so that to me is the biggest thing, is to, don't be shy of showing your personality, but also making sure that you are using it for publicizing your stories, especially when you're at an outlet like The Athletic, where you got to drive people to your site.
Good advice. Joe Harrison, you have a question?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you guys for being here. And second of all, my question would be, how important is it to build relationships with other people on social media? Not necessarily like just your average follower, but people who are in the same industry as you.
Gail, you want to start?
You know what, to me, it's huge, because even before social media, relationships to me were the most important part of the industry. And it's become more so with social. Social let me meet so many people that I would not have otherwise, because maybe I was working a regional on one side of the country and, other reporters were somewhere else. But I think if you're young and in media, that your relationships, no matter where you build them, are going to be important. What I do suggest, if you meet somebody on social and have a dialogue, ask politely, or DM or something, and ask if you can talk offline, whether it's by email or a quick phone call. I realize everybody's crazy busy, maybe not at this point in our lives, but during normal seasons, people are busy, but they're also open, that I found, to sharing a couple minutes with you.
And I feel like, you asked about people in your industry. I mean, the one thing about the hockey writers is that we have incredible relationships with each other, just covering league events. And again, I'm at The Athletic where we have 50 hockey writers, so we really do have a team. So a lot of, to me, more what social media has allowed me is to more have a relationship with the fans. So the people that you are writing for, the fans of the teams that you're covering, feel like they are getting access to you. And I am very, I don't just throw my stories up and then leave. I have dialogues with readers. I direct message with readers. My email is very open for anybody to see. I'm extremely, as I mentioned, I do 3 podcasts and radio and TV. So, people always know my opinion. And so I do think that is the one definite benefit of social media when you're a sports writer is to, is kind of bring people closer again. And, I'm working at a subscription site now. So the one thing is if you can get some of those people that are fans of the team to actually subscribe to the site that I'm working for, it's an added bonus.
Michael, we talked about it earlier. How much is too much social media and which platform or platforms you should be on?
Yeah.
Weigh in on that.
Yeah. I haven't done the TikTok thing yet, but or Snapchat. Yeah. But it took me, Twitter and Instagram's about it. And even on Twitter, I mean, even on Instagram, I wouldn't say I'm extremely active. I think Twitter can be too much. I will say one of the most therapeutic things that's happened during this whole COVID-19 is just with sports being shut down is I've done a lot less scrolling through my phone and looking at Twitter. And sometimes it just becomes too much, especially in my industry where sometimes also you don't know what to believe. I remember when Dave, I talked about this at one of the NSMA conferences down in North Carolina, but I remember during the Parisi Suter breaking story, I found myself for 3 days reading Twitter and I didn't know what to believe. And finally did the old school journalism thing and went out and got the story. I think the one thing that I've always said, especially at that NSMA conferences, is I almost think as sports writers and journalists, we almost have to have a social media summit. We throw, it's not like the old days. And I am, I'm turning 46 tomorrow, but I've been in this industry, as I mentioned, since I was 15. In the old days, you reported a story out fully, and then it was in the next day's paper. Where now it's like everything you hear during a process of a story, you tweet. And things change, stories change. And all of a sudden, you might have been right 5 minutes ago, but you could be wrong 5 minutes later. And I do think that I still have the old school journalist in me where I try to keep, if I'm confident that I know that my competition does not have what I have, I do try to keep things close off social media. And the goal again is to, instead of putting a tweet out that says this guy's signing with this team, it's to actually put the link out of the story that you wrote to make people come to the site. Because the one thing is that it's very hard to monetize Twitter. And I do think, and I know I'm going all over on different topics, but I think the goal is, again, to remember who your employer is and drive people to the place that you're putting up the actual news.
But you would use it to promote
Yes.
that breaking news that's coming without giving it away, right?
Exactly. And probably we promote a little too much of The Athletic. I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, the old joke now with sports writers that aren't at The Athletic is how come every greatest story in the league or in the world is at The Athletic? Because we all pump each other up. And again, we cover basically every team in every professional team and college team in the country in North America, now England. So, as I think Joe asked, we have a lot of great colleagues at The Athletic that we try to promote as well. So, but again, yeah, I use Twitter a lot. I'm pretty prolific on there, but I do think it becomes too much. There's no doubt.
Gail, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I zone.
I know how that works. Who else has a question? And it's fine if you have a second one, just raise your hand or unmute.
May I bring up something about something that came up when I spoke to young broadcasters a few years ago, that's even, and I think you and I talked about it a little bit this morning, about how much social media has changed and how the rules have changed.
Mm-hmm.
a few years ago, someone asked me if it was appropriate to tweet about religion or politics. And I said, only if it's your brand. You know, if it's your brand and you consider yourself a religious writer, or you know, if politics is your jam, that's one thing. And I think the rules have changed a lot in our society. I know I used to never touch it, and then all of a sudden I couldn't keep my mouth closed about it. Well, keep my fingers away from the keyboard. Now, as I said earlier, there are a lot of things that I'll type and delete before it even, before I send it. But I'll ask you guys too, do you think the rules and the way we go about using social media has changed even though we're in sports?
I definitely try to avoid it. I will say that things got blurred here in Minneapolis here the last 2 weeks. And I definitely strayed from my practice and did start tweeting about just what was a very frightening and dejecting time here in Minnesota. And I don't regret what I was doing, but I have noticed my Twitter followers have gone down. I am definitely not a stick to sports guy. We all have opinions. We all live in this world. But I do always try to remember that I represent the, employer that pays me. And I try to do nothing that's going to offend people. Everybody has their own opinions on a gazillion different things. So I try to step away from ever really opining on politics and things like that. But I will say this past week was very, very difficult. The reality is that in today's just crazy social media world where things just go boom like that and everybody is out there and offended by something in a second, it's just so easy to tick somebody off that you didn't even know that you were doing at the very beginning. And again, in my new job, even though I've been here now 3 years, it costs us technically subscribers. So I try to avoid it.
All I have to do is look at the numbers, side A, side B. The lower number is still 35, somewhere in the 30% at any given time. So just think about that as you're pissing off that. And they're not all hardcore, but some of them are. Mm-hmm. And so, just think about that when you do it. As Michael said, if you are working for Company X, they don't want you pissing away subscribers or viewers or listeners.
What prompted me is, and Michael can probably relate, doing 2 podcasts is because obviously sports talk has gotten into it the last couple weeks and on other occasions because a lot of athletes have gotten involved in the protests and things of the sort, and coaches have spoken out. And I'll see people criticize the sports talk shows. But I think we also have to remember, as people who work with athletes or cover athletes or whatever, that they're humans. So you're not straying from sports, you're bringing the human element into it. And I'm not saying to go all in on politics, all in on religion and that kind of thing, but there is a direct correlation, and there has been since, when Ali took his stand and the Olympics, back when. So it's always been intertwined, but not always as loud.
I go back far enough to remember Arthur Ashe getting criticized for speaking up.
I do, and I loved him, and I wish we had more of Arthur Ashe.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Now is the time. We have about a minute or 2 left, so if you have another question, just go ahead and unmute and ask away. If not, while you're thinking, maybe, Michael, when are we going to be back on the ice? When? End of July?
Training camp is supposed to start July 10th, and then probably early August for games. It's still very subject to be changed. There's a lot of hurdles that still have to happen. The players have to approve whatever's here that will be negotiated in the next couple of weeks, and it's definitely not a slam dunk still. Some huge issues.
Have they posited ahead to when a next season will be starting?
Well, that's the one thing right now is it just feels like they are trying to push next season as far back as possible to try to get fans in the building, almost like they're waiting for a vaccine. And so if all of a sudden the qualifying round starts August 1st or 5th, that means the playoffs wouldn't start till August 15th. We're talking about a Stanley Cup that's delivered mid-October. Then you have a truncated offseason with a draft and free agency and then training camp for next year. I mean, you just do the math and we're talking early January. So I think that we're going to see a new NHL calendar for the foreseeable future because there's just no way to ever get back on track if they plan to have a full year next year.
You will not be looking for things to write, no doubt.
No, yeah. The NSMA conferences from now on will be like in the middle of the beginning of the playoffs, actually. So.
Well, and believe me, I've thought that, and that's part of the reason I asked that question is, what do we do with our awards weekend? Because
I have a
want
feeling
people
that
to show up.
Yeah, I have a feeling that all sports leagues are going to have to change their calendars for a long, long time if they, might maybe even permanently. So, same thing with the NBA. So, you might have to push back.
Might be here in the winter or who
exactly.
knows when.
Yeah.
I'd
Fall
rather
would be
be there
nice.
in the winter personally,
Yeah.
And I'd personally rather be there in the winter, Dave.
It depends on the day because
Yes.
it can be different from day to day.
Absolutely.
Gail and Michael, thank you very much. Thank you
And
also to Ryan.
sorry again, I'm late. And
No worries.
if anybody has any questions or anything, you could just tweet me at Russo Hockey or email me at mrusso@theathletic.com.
And if you don't have a subscription yet, I highly recommend it.
Yep.
So there. Thank you, guys. We'll see you all next time. Actually, let me tease ahead. Next Thursday, covering race and racism in sports. Jay Harris, who's one of our board members from ESPN, Lanae O'Neill, who writes for The Undefeated, and LaChina Robinson, who works for ESPN and does women's basketball. All confirmed so far. We might have one more, but that'll be next Thursday at 4, and I would encourage all of you to be here. Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye.